Hi, this is Esther with Discover Your Origins. This is a Research for You video. I'm going to be focusing on William Fuller. And William Fuller was a research question that was submitted to me. If you would like to have a research question featured on the channel, I have a link in the description box below where you can submit it to me. Joshua sent me quite a bit of background material, more than I can cover in a 15 or 20-minute video. But I have a plan of what we can do here looking at William Fuller. I did spend quite a bit of time looking at William Fuller, and there are some questions here that we need to consider. Joshua primarily wanted to learn more about William Fuller. He specifically was interested in looking for records for William's birth date and death date, and also to try to find William's parents who are not here on Family Search. Those are some pretty big questions, and so a professional genealogist is going to create a research objective that focuses on just one thing at a time. So I'm going to put up on the screen what we're going to do here, but first we're going to do some evidence analysis. We're going to look at the sources that are attached to William, and we are going to focus on William's birth date and place in this video. And then we'll come up with a little bit better research plan and kind of go from there. So I'm not sure how much research we'll be able to get done in this video. That might be for the next one, but let's get started. William Fuller, it looks like it says here he is born on the 17th of March, 1810 in Boston, Massachusetts. And there are 3 sources. And then with the family groupings, it looks like he was married twice, first to Augusta Root and then to Susan Taylor Black. And then he had children with the second wife. If we scroll up to the top, it looks like the quality score is high. And looking at William Fuller, I realized that while the quality score is very good in helping you identify things that need to be fixed, it doesn't necessarily mean that things are correct. And this is definitely what I found working on William Fuller. And so while this is great that the score is high, there are definitely questions here that we need to look at. So since I'm focusing on William's birth date, let's look at the sources just for his birth date. We'll just click the pencil icon here and we'll see what sources we have. Okay, so there are 3 sources. These 2 here are basically for the same thing. This book on Root Genealogical Records, so it's a published book on the Root family in America. And so we are going to take a closer look at this book because that is the source for this birth information. And then we're going to take a close look at the 1860 US Census. So first, let's go and look at this book. And I already have it open in another tab, so let's jump over there. All right, so Augusta Root, who's supposed to be the first wife of William Fuller, is right here. She starts on this bottom page, Augusta Root. And this book is on Family Search. If you want to look at it on your own, you can find the link on the profile. And then the page continues here. It says she was born the 18th of February, 1816. She was married the 10th of October, 1838 to William Fuller, who was born the 17th of March, 1810 in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, one thing to keep in mind on a published work like this is that there are no source citations for this information. It was not very common when this book was first published, I think around 1870-ish, to include source citations. It's very difficult to know where this information came from. On top of that, we don't know with any certainty that the William Fuller that is the ancestor of Joshua is the same William Fuller mentioned in this book. We're looking at something in which we may be dealing with the same name, where it looks like it's a match, and maybe over time people have assumed that it is, but we haven't actually gone and found the source documentation. And so, long story short, that means this birth information is actually a question mark, because we need to find actual records that show this. But there's also some other things we need to look at, because this is saying, that book is saying the birth was in 1810. So this census record, Joshua says, is the key record for the family, the William Fuller family. And so we need to look at it very carefully. And you can see here there's some potential record conflicts with the 1810 birth date. So let's go look at it. And you can see here it says the birth year estimate is 1830 and the birthplace is New York. So that does not match what is on the family search profile. So let's go and look at the actual census record here. And here you go. You can see that William Fuller says he was 30 years old, which would mean he was born about 1830. This is the 1860 census. He's born in New York. His wife is 30, born in Pennsylvania. And then his children, all born in New York. You can see them listed here. And then he has a servant in his household from Ireland, which would imply that he had some financial resources available to him if he was able to employ a servant. But the thing that is concerning is this birth year estimate of 1830 and birth location do not match. Also, the family here is located in New York City. You can see the 3rd Division, 18th Ward, 1860. They're in New York City. I did take the time to abstract this family to a document. So when you're working on a complex research problem, this is what I would recommend. Let me go to the research plan. So we're creating a research plan here. Okay, and I've already started working on this, and I'm going to explain this in a little bit greater detail as we go along. But I've created this separate tab here, and I've abstracted the family information from that census. And I would recommend that when you're trying to figure things out, because it will help you see things in a different light. So William Fuller here, he is most likely the oldest child. There could have been some other children. Born in New York, and then the youngest daughter is also born in New York. So the family is in New York by at least 1847. And William was in New York. He was born in New York, so we need to consider that. And you can see the ages here. That means that they wouldn't necessarily have moved and come back. Between children. That just seems unlikely to me in this time period. So from 1847 to at least 1856, the family is in New York. Now I have another table here that I'm going to explain in a minute. So let's go back to William Fuller's page and consider what to do here, because this 1810 birth date in Massachusetts could very well be wrong. So next we have to consider, did William Fuller, the ancestor of Joshua, actually marry Augusta Root? I think that's a really big question, and I think there's a possibility that Augusta Root married William Fuller, but not this William Fuller. New York seems to be a very important location in that census, and so this may be controversial, and will be one of my recommendations, is to disconnect William Fuller from Augusta Root, because there's not any way for us to know that that's a true connection. Now, if you want, you can leave it here alone in Family Search and make the corrections on your own personal tree on Ancestry or somewhere else as you work through this problem. And I think probably the best thing is to ignore this marriage for right now. So then that brings us down to the marriage with Susan Taylor. Now this says that her birth was about 1824, and birth years in census records can vary. So it's very possible that William's birth date is also wrong, of 1830, that it could be very much earlier. And you can see here, the records seem to indicate, for the most part, 3 out of the 4, about 1824 to 26. And so that is probably accurate for her. So William's going to probably be about the same age, I would think. The census seems to indicate that they were about the same age. They are the parents of these children, and there's a marriage record here, and I want to look at this a little bit closer, because if he was born in 1830, that would mean he was 13 years old when he got married, which seems unlikely. People may have married young in that time, but not that young. So we need to look at this marriage record. Let's see if we can find one that has an actual image. So this is a register page. Let's look at some of these others. We can find the actual marriage certificate. That's the register page. And again, that looks like a register. And that may be all that there is. I don't know. Okay. Well, let's go and look at it. And again, there could have been another William Fuller and Susan that married in Washington, D.C., that are not the same as the couple that we are looking at. And you do have to consider that. Okay, here we go. Susan T. Black to William Fuller, April 22nd, 1843. We'll zoom in here. Here's Susan. It seems to be a match. I don't know if there's any way to know more. Kind of put a pin in that as we continue to look at this family. So then this oldest child that's listed here in Family Search was born in 1845, and I've already looked at her, and there's only one source, and there's not really a good source linkage between parent and child. So it's not clear that she is actually a child of this couple. It's possible, but we need to find something else to know for sure. So for the moment, I'm just going to set that aside as a future question. All right, so let's go to our research plan. So we're looking for records for William Fuller's birth, and we're going to focus on New York because we're going to go from what is known to what is unknown. And the 1860 census is what is known, and it says New York. And we want to see if we can find evidence for William Fuller's birth location, and if possible, his birth date. But we're going to focus on birth location because that seems like that is a very important thing. So I have some New York birth record collections that we can look at and search for William Fuller's birth. New York State also has some census records, and so we need to look in these state census records in New York City for William Fuller and his wife, because if they married in 1843 and they were starting to have children, they should be listed in the state census. Whether they're in the 1865 census or not is, I'm not sure, but it's worth looking. And then we do want to go back and look at the federal census records for each child. So these would be census records from when the children are adults, because there are some census years in which the child would report where their father was born. So we want to go and collect that information. And I've created a table here to begin collecting that information. So let me show you what I'm talking about. A lot of these children already have census records attached to them. So we'll go here and we'll look at William Lee Fuller. And we want to focus on census records after 1860. Let's start with the 1880 census here. So here's William Fuller. And it says here in the indexed information that the father's birthplace is New York, but let's go and look at it. All right, we'll zoom in. All right, so here's William Fuller in the 1880 census with his wife and children. And let's see, married. Okay, so he is a clerk of some kind. I'm not sure what that first word is. And then his wife's keeping house. Let's scroll to the side here. He says he's born in New York, and his parents are both born in New York. So I would then come to my little table here, and I'll say this is the 1880. This is William Lee Fuller. And it says father, New York, mother, New York. Now, this is going to be secondhand information because obviously William Lee Fuller did not witness his father's birth, and the only way he would know that information is if somebody told him. So perhaps his father said, I was born in New York. So we'll just keep that in mind that it is secondhand information and could be incorrect. I have seen where it has been incorrect. But as we continue to collect this type of information, if there's a consistency among all of the children that the father was born in New York, then the Massachusetts birth information is clearly not a match. Does that make sense? So I'm going to come back here to William Fuller, and we'll just close that out, and we'll go back and we'll see if there's any other census records that could help us. So we looked at the 1880. Okay, so we've got, okay, he's in the New Jersey State Census. I'm not sure what that's, I'm not as familiar with the New Jersey State Census. So that just looks like it's a count. So that won't help us. But here he is in the 1900 census. So let's look at that. All right, so here's William Fuller again. 1847. Right? And it says he was born in New York and his father in Massachusetts and his mother in Pennsylvania. Okay, so we now have a conflict, but that's all right. We'll just keep going. So we'll say 1900. Okay, so we're going to keep going and we're just going to create this table. This is going to be able to help us see where we need to focus our energy, like I said. So we're going to do it for each child. All right, so I hope that makes sense. We've got the 1900. Let's see, is he in the 1910? Yes, he is. Father's birthplace in Massachusetts. Okay, here's William Fuller again. And it says Massachusetts and Pennsylvania. It's interesting. Okay. We'll continue to build out this table. So that's one of the tasks that you can do, Joshua, is fill out this table. So I have identified New York as a place that I want to look for birth information. And so I've got a few record collections in my research plan here. I may need to also look in Massachusetts, but we may not need to look as early as 1810. We should maybe look for some birth records in 1830. And to identify what record collections to look at, that can be a little bit tricky because we've got multiple locations that we need to look in. So maybe for the first part of this research phase, you'll start in New York, maybe you'll start in Massachusetts, but you'll want to try to look in some different places. So William Lee Fuller, let me come back here. He says he was born in Richmond County, New York. So let's go to the Family Search Research Wiki and see what we can learn. All right, so this is a redirection from Family Search because Richmond County, New York became Staten Island Borough at some point in time. So this is where we're going to look. So if it's a borough, then, you're pretty close to Manhattan or New York City. And so we need to look at some different types of birth records. We have Bible records, we have church records, and then we have birth records. And so we can learn here, New York law did not always require the recording of birth, so records are incomplete. So if he was born in New York, we may not find an official recorded birth record. So that's why you may also want to consider church records. And if you can identify the denomination of the family, you can then look in those types of church records. And these start 1847. In fact, this record collection here might be really good to look in for William Lee Fuller, the child. And I don't know what kind of records what kind of data will be available on the birth records for William Lee. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so this collection is a microfilm copy of handwritten alphabetical cards. At first of each roll, New York City Department of Health, okay, includes the date of birth and the number of the birth certificate. If you can get that birth certificate, you can order it from New York. And I have no idea what information may be on there. Let's see. What does this say? All right. These have to be accessed from a family search center. So Joshua, you're going to have to make a trip to a family search center and look at this collection and see if you could pull the birth certificate number for William Lee Fuller. So we'll put that on future research here. So, but we're going to be focusing on the father. So we'll just keep looking here. And actually, this collection, you could probably look for each of the children, not just William Lee, because maybe it says where the father was born. I don't know. Okay, so we've added that to our research plan. Like I said, we may need to look at church records, which requires knowing the denomination of the family. And there are quite a few church records here for Staten Island. So we'll want to look a little bit more. Some of the other children in the family, I think just say, okay, Howard was in Richmond County. Aspinwall was in Richmond County. And James Jones was New York City. So then we need to look at Manhattan and see what's available in Manhattan for him. And Bessie's in New York City. Okay, which makes sense because they're in New York City in 1860. So the research plan, to at least for this phase, is to go through each of the children and evaluate the records and see if there's records that identify the father's birthplace. I'm going to go back to William Fuller's page here. And so you can see here, I've got the beginnings of this research plan. And so you'll just need to go through each of these things and see what you can find. I have some additional future research here, which would include looking at the death records for the children. So I want to find death certificates for the children because it may name the father and where the father was born. We want to look for a New York obituaries for William Fuller and his wife. We may want to look for marriages in New York between a William Fuller and Susan, because I'm still not 100% convinced that the one that's listed in Washington, D.C. is for them. And then we want to look at maybe some other record collection for William Fuller, and that's going to be future research and see if we can't sort some more things out. But this is just a start. focus on William Fuller's birth location and go through all of the records that you can to see where the father was born. It may be difficult to know for sure of his birth date. So like I said, controversially, you may want to disconnect him and remove this birth date and change it to about 1830. If you don't want to do it on Family Search, that's fine. You could do it on your own tree. But this, I'm thinking, may be wrong. It would seem odd for him to have a 20-year gap between this date and the date that's in the census. That does seem like that would be odd. So we're going to focus on birth records and see what we can find, and then we'll come back and maybe look at a little bit more of William Fuller. I hope that was helpful. When you have a difficult research question, write your question down. Try to be specific about what you want to look for. List specific record collections and the plan, and then start doing some abstracting. You also will want to start keeping a research log and creating source citations for everything that you look at, including for all of the children's census records, so we can get a better idea of what we're dealing with here. But this is the kind of thing that a professional genealogist will do. We're going to eliminate the things that we are not really sure about that seem like they're wrong. And we're just going to set it aside and put it on a shelf and then focus on what we do know. And since the 1860 census was the key record and seems to be what we know about the family, that's what we're going to focus on and go from there. So anyway, like I said, I hope that was helpful. I will have a blog article related to everything that I've talked about here. And so if you'd like to read more and also get some source citations, you can find it in the description box below. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.